Picture this. On this metal table, I have placed three objects, three artifacts of war. The first is a battered pewter flask from the year 1750. It smells of cheap fermented grain and sulfur. It belonged to a Prussian soldier who probably died of liver failure before the enemy could shoot him. The second object is a crushed aluminum tube excavated from the frozen mud of Stalingrad, dated 1942. Inside, there are no love letters, no photos of home, just the residue of pure crystallized methamphetamine. And the third is a sterile blister pack of Modafinil, standard issue for a German KSA operator in 2026. Three objects, separated by 1,000 years, but they all serve the exact same biological purpose. You see, the German military machine has always had a flaw. It builds the best tanks, it forges the best steel, but it is limited by the fragile, fleshy thing operating the machine, the human body. The human body needs sleep. It feels fear. It freezes at 20 degrees below zero. This is not a history of tactics. This is the forensic history of how Germany spent a millennium poisoning its own soldiers to turn them into something more than human. From the gunpowder-laced alcohol of the Middle Ages to the crystal meth of the Nazis to the biohacking of 2026. If you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. Act 1. The Era of Flesh. Let us go back to the beginning, before chemistry labs, before synthetic drugs. The year is 1520, the Holy Roman Empire. You are a Landsknecht mercenary. You are standing in a field of freezing mud, holding an 18-foot pike. Across the field is a wall of cavalry waiting to trample you into a red paste. Your biological instinct, the amygdala in your brain, is screaming at you to run, to drop the pike and flee. So how do you override millions of evolution? How do you stand still and wait for death? You drink the black soup. Forensic analysis of soldier remains from this era shows high concentrations of toxins in their liver. We know from accounts that mercenaries didn't just drink alcohol, they mixed it. They would take crude brandy or beer and stir in black gunpowder, saltpeter, charcoal, sulfur. To the modern ear, drinking gunpowder sounds like a superstition, a ritual to gain the fire of the weapon. But chemically, there was a method to this madness. The nitrates in gunpowder are vasodilators. When consumed with alcohol, they drop your blood pressure rapidly while the ethanol hits your brain. It creates a delirious, aggressive stupor. It doesn't make you brave, it makes you toxic. It induces a state of dissociation where the cold mud and the screaming horses feel distant, like a bad dream happening to someone else. But the hangover was a killer. They called it the Black Dog. Soldiers would wake up, if they survived the battle, vomiting blood, their gastrointestinal tracts burned by the sulfur. Many died not from the enemy's sword, but from the holes burned in their own stomachs. Fast forward to the 1600s, the 30 Years' War. This was perhaps the most miserable time to be alive in human history. Germany lost 1/3 of its population, not just to war, but to the cold. The winters were brutal. The Little Ice Age was in full effect. A soldier in this era wasn't fighting for ideology. He was fighting the temperature. Hypothermia was the constant enemy. Here we see the rise of Dutch courage, gin. Originally distilled as a medicine for kidney problems, it became the fuel of the army. Why? Because it was cheap, it was high proof, and it felt like a warm blanket on the nervous system. But alcohol is a double-edged sword in the cold. It makes you feel warm because it dilates your blood vessels, bringing blood to the skin. But this actually causes your core body temperature to drop faster. Thousands of German soldiers froze to death with smiles on their faces, drunk on gin, thinking they were warm, while their internal organs shut down one by one. By the 1800s, the Prussians had industrialized this chemical warfare against the self. Under Frederick the Great, the soldier was no longer a warrior. He was an automaton, a machine part. Prussian discipline is legendary, but discipline alone cannot make a man walk into a wall of musket fire without flinching. Discipline was enforced by the gauntlet. If you stepped out of line, you were forced to run between two rows of your own comrades, who beat you with birch rods soaked in brine. The pain was so intense that men would often die of shock before they reached the end of the line. To maintain this system, the Prussian state issued alcohol as a daily ration, not as a luxury, but as a sedative. A sober man might question why he is marching into a cannonball for a king he has never met. A sober man might scream when the surgeon cuts off his shattered leg with a rusty saw. But a man with half a liter of schnapps in his blood, he's compliant. Forensic accounts from field hospitals in the 7 Years' War describe soldiers undergoing amputation while singing drunken songs. The alcohol didn't stop the pain, it just made them not care about the consequences. By the end of the 18th century, the German soldier was tough, he was disciplined, but chemically he was a wreck. His liver was scarred, his brain was pickled. The era of flesh was limited by the potency of the drug. Alcohol makes you brave, but it also makes you clumsy. It makes you slow. A drunk soldier cannot operate a complex machine. A drunk soldier cannot pilot an airplane. As the 19th century ended and the Industrial Revolution began, the German military realized they needed something stronger, something cleaner. They didn't need their soldiers to be numb anymore. They needed them to be fast. The age of alcohol was over. The age of chemistry was about to begin.
Act 2. The Era of Industry. The year is 1937, Berlin. While the rest of the world is drinking coffee to stay awake, a German pharmaceutical company called Temmler is cooking up something else. They patent a new method for synthesizing N-methylamphetamine. They brand it Pervitin. It was marketed as a miracle, an alertness aid. Doctors prescribed it to housewives for depression, to factory workers for double shifts. But the German High Command, the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, saw a different use. They didn't see a medicine, they saw a fuel. General Heinz Guderian, the father of the Tank Corps, realized that the limiting factor of modern war was no longer the machine. A Panzer tank can drive for 3 days straight if you keep fueling it. But the human driver, he needs to sleep every 16 hours. Guderian asked a simple biological question: how do we delete the need for sleep? The answer was Pervitin. Between April and July of 1940, as Germany prepared to invade France, the army ordered 35 million tablets. They were distributed to tank crews, pilots, and infantry. They called it Panzerschokolade, or Stuka tablets. Let's look at the forensic biology of a Pervitin high. When a soldier swallows that 3 milligram pill, it dissolves in the stomach and hits the bloodstream in 20 minutes. It crosses the blood-brain barrier and triggers a massive release of norepinephrine and dopamine. This is not energy. This is chemical robbery. The drug is forcing the body to dump its emergency energy reserves all at once. The soldier feels invincible. His pupils dilate. His heart rate jumps to 120 beats per minute. The sensation of hunger vanishes. The sensation of thirst vanishes. But most importantly, the concept of risk vanishes. During the invasion of France, German panzer divisions drove for 3 days and 3 nights without stopping. The French commanders couldn't understand it. They calculated troop movements based on human biology, assuming the Germans would have to stop to sleep. But the Germans didn't stop. They were a zombie army, chemically reanimated, rolling through the Ardennes forest with eyes that couldn't close even if they wanted to. But biology always demands a refund. By 1941, the cracks were showing. You cannot cheat the need for sleep forever. The Pervitin hangover was brutal. After 72 hours of wakefulness, soldiers would collapse into a coma-like sleep that lasted for days. Those who couldn't sleep developed psychosis. They saw enemy soldiers in the trees who weren't there. They fired at shadows. Paranoia spread through the ranks like a virus. And then came Russia. The drug that conquered France became the poison of Stalingrad. In the freezing temperatures of the Eastern Front, Pervitin became a death sentence. Why? Because meth restricts blood flow to the extremities. It's a vasoconstrictor. When you are high on speed in minus 30 degrees, you don't feel the cold. Your brain is telling you that you are warm and powerful, but your fingers are turning black. Surgeons reported cutting off thousands of toes and fingers that had frozen solid because the soldiers were too drugged to notice the frostbite setting in until the flesh was dead. Worse, when the crash hit, it was fatal. A body exhausted by weeks of chemically induced marching has no caloric reserves left to generate heat. We have excavated bodies near Stalingrad that show no signs of bullet wounds. They simply sat down during the Pervitin crash and their hearts stopped beating. They froze from the inside out. But the Nazi leadership didn't stop. As the war turned against them in 1944, they got desperate. Pervitin wasn't enough. They needed something stronger. This brings us to the darkest chapter of forensic military history, the D9 experiment. The location, Sachsenhausen concentration camp. The goal, to create a superdrug for the mini-submarines and child soldiers defending Berlin. Vice Admiral Helmuth Hay requested a drug that would allow a soldier to fight for 4 days without rest. The formula they created was a cocktail of nightmares. 5 milligrams of cocaine, 3 milligrams of Pervitin, 5 milligrams of Eucodal, a morphine-based painkiller. They called it D9. It was essentially a speedball designed to turn a human being into a mindless fighting machine. But they needed to test it. They didn't use rats. They used the Schullaufer Palando, the shoe walking unit. These were concentration camp prisoners forced to march on a circular track to test boot soles for German factories. But in 1944, they became chemical guinea pigs. The prisoners were given D9 and forced to march with 20-kilogram packs. The results were terrifying. The drug worked. Emaciated, starving men marched in a circle for 24 hours without stopping. Some marched for 90 kilometers before collapsing. They marched until they suffered catastrophic cardiac arrest. The drug masked the pain of muscle tears, stress fractures, and organ failure. They were dead men walking, powered only by chemistry. The war ended before D9 could be mass-produced for the troops, but the legacy remained. Germany had proven that you could break the biological limit of sleep, but the cost was the soldiers' humanity. By 1945, the Wehrmacht wasn't an army of supermen. It was an army of hollowed-out addicts shaking in the ruins of the empire they built on speed. The industrial era tried to conquer sleep with a sledgehammer, and it failed. But the desire didn't go away. It just went underground. The generals learned a lesson. Don't use a sledgehammer. Use a scalpel.
Act 3. The Era of Silicon. After 1945, the German military changed. The Bundeswehr was built on the ashes of the Wehrmacht with a new philosophy, inner Führung, or inner leadership. The days of drug-fueled berserkers were over. Pervitin was banned. The zombie soldier became a symbol of national shame. But the biological problem remained. War still happens at night. Special forces operations still require 48 hours of continuous focus. In the 21st century, the German Kommando Spezialkräfte, or KSK, faced the same enemy as the Landsknecht, the circadian rhythm. But instead of gunpowder schnapps or tank chocolate, they turned to Modafinil. Let's analyze the pharmacology of the modern soldier. Methamphetamine is a sledgehammer. It floods the brain with dopamine, causing euphoria and eventually psychosis. Modafinil is a scalpel. It was originally designed to treat narcolepsy. It targets orexin and histamine, the neurotransmitters responsible for wakefulness. The difference is forensic. A soldier on Pervitin has shaking hands and paranoia. A soldier on Modafinil is calm. His heart rate is normal. He doesn't feel high. He simply forgets to be tired. He can function for 60 hours with the cognitive precision of a man who just woke up from a nap. Welcome to 2026, the era of the quantified soldier. Today, chemical survival is no longer about guessing. It is about data. The German infantryman wears a biosensor that monitors heart rate variability, galvanic skin response, and pupil dilation. It is a check engine light for the human body. When the algorithm detects that the soldier's reaction time has dropped by 10%, it doesn't just yell at him to be tough. It vibrates. It tells him to hydrate. It tells him to consume a precise dose of caffeine or synthetic nootropics. We have moved from liquid courage to tactical biology. In 2026, the German army is testing non-invasive vagus nerve stimulators, electric patches on the neck that can zap the nervous system into a state of calm focus, effectively deleting panic without a single chemical entering the bloodstream. It is cleaner. It is safer. The liver doesn't rot. The teeth don't fall out. But is it better? The forensic reality is this: we are still treating the human being as a faulty component. We are still hacking the motherboard to override the safety features evolution gave us. The Landsknecht drank to forget the fear. The Nazi popped pills to ignore the exhaustion. The modern operator uses tech to optimize the kill. The chemistry changes, the uniform changes, but the biological fact remains. The human body was not designed for war, and for 1,000 years we have been trying to void the warranty. Part 4. The verdict. Look at these two objects one last time.
The flask represents a time when we accepted pain as part of life. The blister pack represents a time when we believe we can engineer pain out of existence. But ask any veteran, the crash always comes. Whether it's the hangover, the withdrawal, or the burnout, you can borrow energy from tomorrow, but you always have to pay it back with interest. Now I have a survival question for you. If you were dropped into the freezing mud of Act 2, holding the line for 3 days without sleep, would you trust the raw, brutal energy of the Pervitin to keep you alive? Or would you wait for the clinical, calibrated focus of modern Modafinil? Let me know your choice in the comments below. And if you think chemical warfare is brutal, you haven't seen what happens when the bullets actually hit. For the gruesome forensic reality of German battlefield surgery, from the rusty saw to the robot, click right here. I'll see you in the operating room.